roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi.
Here.
Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy. Lisa Murray. Here. Rich Whitaker. Mike Tirabassi.
Here.
And Michelle Bujo. Here. Will you please stand? Bill will lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Over by the front door.
I couldn't see because of the sun. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have the need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law C, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigations, including case number MUP-22-9541 et al. An open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body and the chair's affairs.
Make a motion to go into executive session.
Second. So we will do roll call to go into executive session. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl? Sean?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Mike?
Yep.
And myself, aye. We are now moving to executive session at 5:51.
So wait, do we stay here or are we going over here? We're going to go in there. Yeah, exactly. So just finish the budget out. Right. If they want to do that.
Go to the end of like the website, how you have the website. You go to the very end, and the last two things, everything just went dead again. I don't know. David and I were just talking about that. Maybe that connection, because I might be having a problem. We never took that. So anyways, so that's why. Yeah. Plug the connection. I know. It should have nothing to do with that. But, which is why I always plug mine in, because I don't trust my battery.
And that's why you plug it in.
Yeah.
The backup was.
It's going to be your connection. Because we use it so much.
And it's funny because it happened today, but it's different. You got maybe a camera 8, but
Yeah.
I have camera 3.
Yeah.
Same thing.
I have to go on the end of on the recording for that and see. So, and is Rich Ryder going to be doing this or not? I don't know. How many remember these? Their job. He runs them on the Thursdays and not able to attend his Thanks, Aaron.
Each of the cameras are different because you can look in them. And when it's a battery, you'll see like a basically a meter, you know, the So when you're plugged in, okay, you won't see the battery. So,
It, you know what?
yeah.
It went black, so I didn't have any of the, like, the little, I don't know those little, where would it, now we
Well,
are
so
plugged in, so
see,
you can't
now
see
they're
it.
different, right. So they're different. This one, I think, would show up in the top right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the older ones are at the
The
bottom.
bottom, but this would be up here.
Yeah,
Okay. And is that 1 hour and 54 minutes the tape that we have on?
that's, yeah, on one of the cards.
Parts.
Yeah.
We have plenty of that. Now they're that one charge, that's something.
Yeah.
He said they learned how to charge it, so email,
Hmm.
how to charge it in there,
Right.
in case you wanted to just leave that one. But
Well, one time I did have a started to be twice with that same camera tape, and I think one of the times I was scared,
I think I do remember.
and I was scrambling around trying to find the battery that I had the same realization. Wow, it's complicated.
You remember now you're saying that, it was just about
So,
it. It just felt weird when I was first pulled. There's no like release, it really just.
oh, yeah, there is actually a little release here. I think, yeah, there's a little
Maybe I
button, you
did.
must have just touched
I
it,
must
yeah.
have just touched it, because
Yeah.
at first I was like,
Yeah.
and I pushed this, and that was not, that one, not the release button, so.
Right,
But it was only a few minutes, so.
right.
Very, very quick. Which all of us stay home to make that. We lost, on the ski, we like.
I thought that's what Michelle reads at MGL or whatever. I think that's a special act to allow hybrid meetings, I think. I could be wrong
No,
about
it
this.
is something to do with that, right? Is that, well, the thing is, it's unfortunate, but he really has to have
Right,
something,
right.
the live stream option is on that, so that's what that, which is a, stop, I'm turning off, what are you turning?
Yeah. That was funny. Well, I was just gonna say, that last night, at that finance meeting, lost GoTo meeting.
They're in executive session.
So they had to adjourn, and they had a meeting tonight. So, and here's Mark.
What a mess.
What a mess.
Last night was,
Oh, that was a,
the GoToMeeting server, I don't nationwide, went down.
there was a lot of internet problems yesterday. I had a problem at home at 4 o'clock with the internet.
So we can switch to, how do you do that?
You adjourned.
We canceled the meeting.
And that's what John was gonna do Monday, so I guess that is illegal. John, policy, my day was away, I was filming, and the thing was black.
Filming's different. You don't need to film.
Oh.
But if
No,
it's
you
Go-
don't, well,
I see, that's what I think I'm confusing.
Yeah.
He's right, it's not legal that I have to do that.
No, that's not a legal issue. But if you post it as an online, in-person meeting, and the online portion goes down, and the phone was working, but people who were only connected to the internet lost it.
No, right, so that's different, I'm not doing hybrid anymore. People can't communicate on a,
you
like,
can't communicate, but you are live streaming. Live streaming is the link.
right.
Yeah, that would be the
This,
same thing.
if this doesn't went down, for example, like you lose battery, for
Right,
example.
we would have to cancel them. Yeah.
Oh, I guess.
Right, we would have had.
Yeah, because you had to go on the tour.
Yeah. Walked up the stage. Man, what's up there? We're all there. Yeah, there's people out there. This sad part is Sean's not doing well at all. He's not doing, I talked to Dave a few weeks ago, but he's not doing well at all. Last I talked to him, he's still in the hospital. Not doing well at all. Oh, he was a couple years ahead of me. Yeah. And they said they said some stuff.
That's what I thought she said. Can you read those? See John and that.
The rooms are on at 7, so we appreciate it. They were very good. Playing the Rangers, I'd like to watch that game. I was hoping to watch that game. Or maybe it's 7:30. I think it might be 7:30.
Usually it's 7 a.m.
Usually they're 7, but sometimes this might be an actually televised game because it's such a big game.
Yeah, it's Thursday. Was on Monday, don't they have ABC coverage? No, Saturday night. National.
Well, TNT gets some, and ESPN gets some too. So,
Pardon, 7?
7 o'clock.
Still no competition for you, Mark. That's from yesterday at noontime.
That's a good game. Yeah.
I'm happy for them. At the same time, I'm happy for me. Well, which begs the question, do you five?
Sure we were in the box before the art and most of that years.
That's,
And we're going to be talking about that next.
Funny, and I was young. I really liked film. I enjoyed
Jim
it.
just said they're going to go to 5.
they are. I
thought I was doing 4.5 on Tuesday. I ended up doing 5 3/4. I just was blowing myself out, but, you know.
You know, I was running last Wednesday. I was 4.5 miles in, and all of a sudden I just felt like half an hour. I was like,
That's horrible.
don't even know what I don't even know what I did. Not that you know of.
We are one of 211
Wasn't the statistic from the SOA like 90% of the money in the SOA is spent on like 15 school districts in the state?
I don't know the exact statistic, but
And I remember when they passed it, this was before your time, when they passed it, the union reps came in here and they had this huge check and they were parading it around like, yeah, we got all this money.
happened where I was too.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yep, everybody was so excited about it,
Involved.
basically they just gave it to us.
So nonetheless, along with that lack of funds comes a requirement to commit an SOA plan. So I put together our first SOA plan shortly after I arrived, and I was asked to put together our updated SOA plan now 3 years later. So attached, you will find our Student Opportunity Act plan. If you look at the bottom paragraph of the memo, however, it highlights the 2 items that we're looking to make effort towards. The first is the adoption of the multi-tiered systems of support. You might recognize that from our strategic plan. In fact, you'll recognize both of these items from our vocational opportunities. We will have some reporting back to the state annually as to the progress on these items, but they're all the data that we'll be using is data that we would probably have used anyhow to validate those items. So I'm not going to go into the whole Student Opportunity Act and read it verbatim. What we do need to do is have the school committee vote to adopt this as our SOA plan.
I make a motion to approve the district's 3-year Student Opportunity Act plan and submit it to the state.
Second. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the cost of the measly cost of the paper that it took to print this out is actually more than the money that we got from the state to actually produce the document.
You are in fact correct.
3 cents, it actually cost us 3 cents to produce this document. The state didn't reimburse us any of that.
Probably works, it's colored.
It would be great if we had kept that check that they were holding up. Maybe we could try to cash it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
So the second memo you have relates to school choice and METCO seats that we would request the school committee authorize. For the past couple of weeks, I've been working collaboratively with the principals. Annually, I ask for, from Colleen Mayberry, our data person, the numbers in all of our classrooms and schools. I look at the population report, and I start thinking about, where can we maybe onesie twosie, where do we have an opportunity to look at a seat or two. I consult with the principals, ask if they think it's warranted, if there's space, what other issues they might have in classrooms. The big school that has a lot of ups and downs, literally because of the size of the school, there's more variance, is Green Meadows School. So we have some bigger classes, we have some smaller classes, and we use choice to try to balance out those seats. You may recall last year, we authorized a number of seats, 11 seats at the second grade level to round out a bubble class. So this year, Principal Moberg would like to retain those 3 classrooms, and what we've done is we've actually moved some of those seats around, so we weren't able to get the full 11 at that grade level. So if you look at some of our numbers on the opposite side, we look at Green Meadows. Working with Sharon, she's identified that we could take 2 choice students at grade 1 next year in 2 classes, so that would be 1 student per class. Grade 2, a total of 3 choice students, that would level out the classes. And then at grade 4, 2 classes take a total of 3 students. So that would help offset the cost of, say, a 3rd bubble classroom for that school. Additionally, in speaking with Principal Parsons at Sewell Road, her class going into 4th grade, the class coming up to 4th grade next year, is smaller. We didn't want to take any additional choice seats last year because that was a class that was at Stony Hill, and Stony Hill doesn't necessarily have the space to accommodate additional students if they can avoid it. So this year, Missy has indicated she could take up to 9 choice students in that class. We don't feel that this would overburden that class when it reaches the middle school. The outgoing class in grade 5 going into grade 6 is 169 students. This would bring the class up to 154 students coming into 4th grade. We think that's reasonable. It won't overtax the middle school if and when those students arrive. You'll also notice that the Green Meadows incoming 4th grade class is also a little smaller, so that will relieve some pressure on the middle school. Finally,
hold on, Aaron, you're confusing me. Is not the middle school overcrowded?
yes.
To a critical point where
Yes.
where we originally had a plan to move one of the entire grades out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult for me to wrap my mind around the concept that it would be responsible to add any school choice seats below high school level until we have more responsibly dealt with the overcrowding. But I'm newer on the committee, so maybe I'm missing something. But
No, it actually makes a lot of sense. And so, the idea of adding any school choice seats even at the high school level, to me, is baffling. Because we've talked for, 7 years about moving the 8th grade to this building. I mean, that's not a new conversation. Although people in this community walk into here like, we just told them that, the apples grow on trees. I mean, for God's sakes, we've been talking about this forever. And so when we talk about adding school choice seats, but we're 250 kids shy of the planned operating capacity of this building, and the middle school is literally just oozing. Have you guys driven to the middle school lately and tried to pick up a kid? I mean, there are parents that get there at 1:45 because they need to get in line to get their kids at other schools. I mean, this is ridiculous. No, forget school choice. Like, we need to figure out what we're doing with our own kids before we add another 44. Our schools right now, Sewell Road is Stony Hill and Mile Tree are bursting. They're both over capacity. The middle school, we don't even have a library because we're using library space for classroom space. But we're going to add more kids to school choice? let's use that as a fire to get things moving, to start moving kids around. The 8th grade should be in this building next year. We don't have a choice. We're gonna kick this can down the road another year, and we're gonna have the 8th grade sitting over at Wilbraham Middle School. Nothing is going to change. We're gonna have the exact same problems that we're having this year, and we're gonna have next year. And we need to figure out what we're doing for, for our grade configurations in our town before we decide what we're gonna do with, with 44 new kids. Sorry.
I mean, I understand that it would be nice to fill classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just concerned about the implications, because I fully believe in our commitment. Once we accept a school choice student, it's our commitment to get them educated unless they choose to leave us. But I really feel that we're struggling in the middle school, and we're quite a far way. We're actually pretty far away from an operational plan that's going to fix that at this point, after our last public comment session. So, I don't know, it's just kind of my feeling. I mean, I have no problem adding the school choices in the high school personally, but the lower grades, I have concern.
So I just want to make it clear that the choice seats, particularly at Green Meadows, are intended to offset the cost of retaining a teacher for a bubble class there. So that class, that grade right now has, I believe, 52 students. That would be classes of 26 students going into 3rd grade.
Before move-ins.
Mm-hmm.
Before move-ins, before if there are any additional students that move to Hampton.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you would
So that
also
would
have,
affect.
so if the regional agreement were changed to eliminate town lines between the 2 towns, you would have the ability to take some kids and move them to Green Meadows, and you wouldn't necessarily be putting ourselves in this position. So again, I mean, this is, I don't think we should, buy ourselves another set of crutches to get us through another. I think we need to figure this out. We need to figure this out now, and we need to get a plan together. So all we're doing is making things worse. You pick up 8 kids here, 7 kids here, 9 kids there, and before you know it, you got another 100 kids in school choice that are coming up through into the high school. Now you want to move another grade into the high school, and you got to deal with 100 school choice kids, because that's what you've taken in the last 5 years, using these as, as little crutches.
Can I make a motion to accept the 5 Medco students into the HWRSD for the 2025 school year?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? I have some additional questions, but it does not pertain to this motion.
Couldn't hear you. You have some additional?
Yes, but it does not pertain to this specific motion.
Yeah, I thought we would get choice, we would get Medco out of the way before we talk about the choice.
Any other questions or discussion? Two at Green Meadows and 3 at the high school.
Aaron, do you want to just go over the MECCO program a little bit, just for those?
Sure. The MECCO is a program that brings students from urban centers to suburban school districts, provides opportunities for students from those urban centers to experience a different environment in a suburban setting. It affords the opportunity of the suburban school the opportunity to diversify their population. And so the Western Mass program is affiliated with Springfield. There are programs in Eastern Mass affiliated with Boston. So many Boston suburbs take a number of MECCO students. We're one of, I think it's 7 or 8 districts out here that take MECCO students. Prior to my arrival, we had not done anything to sort of maintain our MECCO program, so we were down to, I think, 1 or 2 students at one point. That left us in danger of losing our MECCO funding, which was $130,000. I spoke with the MECCO director, who then said, well, you know, we hold harmless, so once you had a certain level, we don't want to reduce that. But at some point, we have to look, if you're not really making any effort, the program does have to kind of look at what you're doing. So I came back last year to the school committee, offered to take on the role of MECO director, and asked the school committee to reaffirm their commitment to MECO and a willingness to start taking students. As of now, we have 6 students in the program. This is an effort to sort of keep that commitment going and bringing up numbers. As we get beyond the point where I think it's about $8,500 a student. I don't know exactly the math around what that gets us to get beyond the 130,000. We would have an opportunity to get more funding for some of those students. Is that kind of
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I mean, the MECO students that we're looking for, we've got 2 in grade 1 and then 3 at high school level, is that correct? Those are all 9th graders.
Those would largely be 9th graders, yeah. I don't think we'd be looking at that.
Okay. And the MECO, because the MECO is funded differently,
Yes,
so.
yes,
And we currently have 6 in the school district,
yes.
and so this would double that number essentially,
We're pretty close to doubling.
bring us to 12.
Yeah.
So, and once you get above 15,
In the 15 range. we
now
have
when you
the
go,
opportunity.
so when you talk about a funding increase over 15, what are you talking about in terms of
It's typically about $8,500 a student.
$800 a student
$8,500 per student.
when you go over?
The funding formula is, I can't remember the exact number, but it's just about $8,500 per student. We're in a hold harmless situation, so that means that at some point we had enough students to qualify for $130,000 in MECO funding. And we would never, their principle is that we won't get less than that. It helps with normal program variance, right? You might have one year when you can't take as many. So the idea is this is a little bit similar to choice. It's not any sort of mandate. What it is it's an extra seat. So if you have, you know, room at a grade level, you know, you can take a MECO student at that grade level, rather than, you know, forcing us to take 50 students or 30 students. It's not forced, it's optional.
But that's not a, so the MECO funding is for the programs, you're getting 130,000.
Yes.
So right now, if you got 130 divided by 6, you're looking at 12,000.
Right. Right now we're getting about 12,000. Yes.
So you add another 5, and now we're cutting that number down to
Per student down a little bit, yes, but it's going to maintain our program. And as I said, at some point, they reserve the right to kind of look at our commitment and our program, and then say, well, you're not really meeting, you know, the sort of expectations of the program.
So what happens in that, let's say that they did that, let's say that we had 5 and then next year they come back and they say you're not meeting the expectations of the program, do they just cut the funding?
They could.
Well, that seems like a gamble. So we have no guarantee of what MECO's gonna do, we're hanging on a $130,000 promise, but they can come back next year and basically say, yeah, you guys aren't meeting the expectations of the program and we're gonna take your funding away.
The goal is that we should be making an effort to maintain our not maintain numbers. It's not about if we drop to 5, they're going to, you know, threaten to take away. Where we were sitting with only 1 student who was potentially going to graduate, at that point we would have 0, and we'd be getting $130,000 for 0 students. That would, you know, put a target on us, right? That would become pretty obvious that we're not living up to that.
So at what point do we think MECO would be saturated?
I don't know if the word is saturated. I think
Well, I mean, at what point do we think it's economically unfeasible, or do we think that the scale that MECO goes up?
I think the goal right now would be to get somewhere between, you know, a consistent number of 10, 12, 15 students and maintain that on an ongoing basis to the best of our ability, so that we're within sort of the scope of what that funding looks like, and if at some point we made a determination and there were more funding available, we could expand the program if that were an option. I think, but for right now, I think just getting to the point where we're living to the ideals of the program is important. You know, if we don't want to live to the ideals of the program, I think we should, you know, make a decision about the program, right? If we're going to hover at 1, 2, 3 students, I think, A, they're going to catch on to that, and we're going to really not be living to the ideals of the program.
So, Bill, you asked a good question. What is the saturation of Metco? I'm just trying to do some quick numbers, and I may have numbers wrong. So, if you evaluate those seats as similarly reimbursed as school choice, that would be $5,000 per student. So
Correct.
And if they're paying us $130,000, that could be up to 26 Metco students.
Could be.
I mean, if Bill's asking the question, where would we be saturated, like we can't go past?
I believe that there may be a misunderstanding here, and it has to do with the hold harmless. So to just explain that, the $130,000 that the district is receiving was based on when the program was sort of fully fleshed out, and over time, the number of students in that program declined. But the state said, we're not going to give you less money than we're currently providing. Last year, the school committee voted to maintain the Metco program because we got down to when it was going to be 0. What Aaron is saying is that the program is funded at approximately $8,500 per student. But right now, because the multiplier of 5 times that 8,500 is less than 130,000, we're not receiving more. Were we ever to get to the point where the number of the multiplier equaled our hold harmless amount, then we would be eligible for that additional money above that amount. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, motion carries 5-1. Thank you.
And I would say the reason why I oppose it is just uniformly, until we figure out what we're doing with the population, I don't think it's wise to bring anybody else in.
I have a question regarding the school choice. So I know in the memo it stated that 11 seats were offered last year for that grade 2 class at Green Meadows and only 4 seats were taken. So I understand that the current seats that are being offered or being proposed at Green Meadows is to offset the cost of the teaching position for that bubble class
Yes.
for the incoming third grade.
Yes.
If we run into the same situation and the seats are not filled.
Mm-hmm. So I think last year we rolled the dice. And because we didn't absorb the full cost of the teacher, we're absorbing that out of the general fund. If we don't, so right now we've got 4 seats already in the bag, so I call that $20,000. What we need to do is look at raising the difference. And so that's what this effort is to do. It's, in my mind, it's a good faith effort to do that. Between the additional seats at Green Meadows and then the seats at Sewell, ideally we would fill enough seats to offset that cost. We also feel that by spreading it out among classes, we have more of a chance of filling those seats. Trying to do 11 all at once was arguably, a pretty big lift.
And do you happen to know, are we posting school choice seats later than other districts?
Yes.
Okay. What is the typical time? What would be the ideal time to post?
It varies, but February is pretty common. And as you'll see in this, we're kicking the can down the road a little bit on proposing any kindergarten seats because we don't know what those kindergarten numbers are going to look like, and we suggest we might come back to talk about kindergarten.
And then my final question is, are your school choice, the proposed school choice seats, are those worked into the proposed 2025 budget? Already, are those numbers?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
we're taking money out of choice. We have a positive choice balance in general. So the money coming out, we are arguably overspending what we would be taking in this year. Some of this is intended to ameliorate that a bit. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, so right now, and my calculations might be off, so help me out here. In Wilbraham, Still Road, 4th grade has what, 21, 22 kids per class?
145, the class going into 4th grade?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 145 students in that total class, so divide that by 7, you get 20, 21.
Okay. And then if we go into 3 classes for Green Meadows, that brings it to 17, 17, 18. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes. It's not 4th grade we're looking at 3rd grade. It will be the incoming 3rd grade that will go up to that. 52, yes, but yes.
Right, okay.
So first and second grade?
It's 2nd going into 3rd, yeah.
Right. So, and if we didn't do anything, they would be 26 each, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions, discussion?
Yeah, really, like, if we do the academy that we had talked about, you know, coming to the high school, I'm just trying to figure out what our options are, and will this hamstring us by adding 44 students that will already, you know, that we're already, I'd rather have a plan and then add the school choice, rather than say, okay, we don't have a plan, but let's add the school choice, and they'll just be a part of the equation that we have to solve. I understand that we do have one problem that we have to solve, how do we pay for that teacher, or do we go to Green Meadows with 2 classes of 26? I'm just thinking that we need to have a solid plan in place, because if we can have a plan in place and put it to a vote and Hamden says no, and then we're back to where we were before, I think, yeah. What do you have, John?
I mean, that is my exact thoughts, Sean, especially looking at this. I mean, this is proposing to add 12 students to the 4th grade, which will become the 5th grade the next year,
Yeah.
right? And then, you know,
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question on the question that Ms. Boudreau asked. So the question was, were any of these positions or any of these choice seats built into the budget? And my understanding, although I only picked up the tail end of this because it was just before I got here, but my understanding was that choice seats were added at the high school in order to add an administrative position. Is that correct or not?
Yes, that is correct. So, yes.
So if
Some of
these-
those are built in.
So if these high school ones were not filled, then we would be losing the funding source for that administrative position?
Correct.
Okay.
Why so? When the ones that we got for last year, we still get funding again for this year and the year after that. Yeah, I think it would be 3 more years before we would lose that funding.
Well, because he's replacing the graduating seniors with choice. It's basically trying to maintain the same level.
We have 29 school choice that are graduating in this year.
I don't know the exact number.
27, excuse me.
So the sort of agreement we made, typically there were 20 to 25 taken at a grade level in the past. In working with Steve Hale to fund this position, Steve agreed that he would take 5 more per grade going up. So over the course of 4 years, we would build up to $100,000, right? 5 build up, 5 plus each year. We've taken enough money to fund that assistant principal. So now, if we back off of that, we will be, over 4 years, we'll be taking back that money. So 1 year won't entirely take it all away, but 1 year will take away 25% of it, 2 years will take away.
27 students will give us $135,000. Does this position cost more than $135,000?
Well, so we're funding our budget on $835,000 of school choice money.
We're just.
At this point, that assistant principal is built into the budget, and the choice dollars are an offset to the budget, right? So we've added $100,000 to the budget through that assistant principal. And the intent was that over time, we would gradually take more choice students at the high school than Steve agreed that he would take a few more each year than he had in the past to offset that cost. And the number, it really depends on how many 8th graders are coming up to the 9th grade, right? So he can't always say, he couldn't ever always say, I'm taking 25 every year. But what he would say is I could take 20 this year, 25. And the commitment from Steve was he was going to try to take 5 to 10 more each year than he ordinarily would to offset the cost.
So those numbers never flex downwards, they always flexed upwards. It was 25, but I would always see it creep up to 28, 29, you always, I remember one year, I think it was like 33, because there was, they had like 5 extra kids, and it was like, all right, yeah, we can fit those kids in. But the biggest problem that I see is that, we continue to take these kids in. So we have somewhere between maybe 120, 130 kids in school choice in this building, which is taking up space, so that if you want to bring another grade in, it will take you 4 years to wean yourself off of that. And the other thing is that when we look at school choice dollars, and I think we just have to look at this in terms of common sense, right? $5,000 per student, yeah, it's great. You add 40 students and you get, whatever, $200,000, right? You're like, yeah, that's great. We get that money for our budget. The problem is that if we take our school budget with the number of students that we have right now with our SIMS data, and we divide that by our total budget, our annual expenditures per pupil is over $18,000. So we're spending $18,000 to educate one child, but we bring a child in school choice and we're getting 5. And so from an economic standpoint, that makes no sense to me.
But Bill, you know the reason why. We've talked about this. So if you have a classroom teacher, and in the classroom they have 18 kids, you add 2 more kids to it, you don't have to pay for another teacher, you're just utilizing that teacher for an extra 2 students.
Correct.
So there's not necessarily another $18,000 spent on each student.
No, but
That's the economics, and that's why anyone looks
No,
at
but
school choice at all.
no, but the economics that needs to be taken into consideration is have we controlled for all of the variables in our budget? And the answer is no, we haven't. We haven't controlled for all the variables because we have right now a regional agreement that separates the 2 towns. And so your ability to be able to redistribute students regardless of town lines makes a huge difference in terms of what you may be able to do budgetarily. So you could literally take some kids from South Wilbraham, bring them to Green Meadows, even out your class sizes, you would not need to add school choice seats. You would be able to take some kids and move them to other schools. The other thing is when we look at, and I will go back to this, and I don't give 2 hoots. I know a lot of people came and they complained about neighborhood schools, but the greatest amount of flexibility that you have in a district to be able to control the number of students in your building is if you have a sequential grade configuration. So have we controlled all the variables? No. As a matter of fact, we're not even trying to control the variables, and yet we just continue to just offer up this school choice as a way to just get these dollars pumped into our district, and I don't agree with that. I don't think it's right that you should be, inviting people to stay in your home if you don't know where they're going to sleep.
So you're saying we're not trying? I mean, isn't that why we have a whole planning committee and we put together the, strategic plan and stuff like that, and we're working towards a solution. But from hearing from all parties, we're just getting all these negative feedbacks about moving the 8th grade to the high school, again, due to fear and concerns of the safety of the students, whether those are well-founded fears or not. At this point, they're fears. And no one's going to vote and be happy with how we vote for their kids.
So we're moving their cheese. Basically, that's what it comes down to.
We're moving their cheese.
Have you ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
No, I have not.
So read it. It's a very good book. But the problem is that we went through this argument several years ago when we made the K through 8 at Green Meadows. And parents came in with this idea that we were going to walk down the halls and there were going to be children being roasted on open spits by the upperclassmen. It didn't happen, all right? Went along very smoothly, and it made sense for the district at the time. This building is underutilized, period. Now, if the taxpayers of these two towns want to continue to just see their tax rates increase at the expense of the school district, by all means, let's continue to do this, because we're just kicking the can down the road and we're not solving the big problems that are sitting right in front of us. So if we want to go to that level, then just tell the taxpayers, you know what, if you guys want to run a very inefficient system and pay more money for that, and probably receive inferior educational quality, by all means. But we still can't ignore the fact that educationally, the middle school is a mess. And I know because I have two that just finished the middle school and one that's there now. And I can tell you that it's unconscionable that we continue to we just need to look at this problem. It's like we're watching a car burn on the side of the road, but nobody's doing anything.
All right, to say that no one's doing anything, I think is just not a smart statement to make in public because it's not true.
We can move
we
the
have put on the backs of our teachers. We put on the backs of our teachers this overcrowding. And I can tell you right now, my son and his friends do not feel like they are overcrowded at the middle school because the teachers are making the sacrifices and the teachers are making things right. They are turning libraries into classrooms. The kids don't even see that it's not a classroom. The teachers are doing amazing jobs and they are keeping the pain of this overcrowding away from the students. So just be careful what you say, though. Come on.
So anyway,
I'm sorry, I have to respond to that. Sean, do not admonish me. You do not have the
I just did.
You do not have the authority of the commission, or quite frankly, I don't think it's appropriate to do it. If I offer an opinion, you could say that you respectfully disagree with my opinion. However, to say that your kids aren't affected, well, that's fine. You know what, Sean? You can say that, and that's great. But I can tell you, having two that went through the school and one that's going through it now, there are problems, and I see the problems.
Isn't one of your kids like the #1 in the high school right now in the grade?
so I'm going to respectfully move on to Cheryl Carolan's comment. Thank you.
So I want to get back to the choice of having the 8th graders at the high school. I was really pleased that we set aside a whole evening to hear the town, the two towns, to what they thought about this idea. And they were really, to a person, pretty much 100% against it. How dare we think that 100 people can come to our auditorium and say, no, don't do this, we don't want it, we don't want that kind of school system. And then all of a sudden we vote for, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't know what they want. We'll tell them what they want, and they'll like it. I don't work like that.
So the one thing I want to say to that is,
I'm not trying to argue with you.
no, I'm not. I'm just offering. Yeah, I'm just offering the counter.
Whatever you think.
Yeah, I'm offering the counter to it. The counter to it is that I don't know exactly where the parents were that are in favor of it. I can tell you that I've had many offline conversations with families who think it is an absolutely fantastic idea. You will always get the opposition to show up to any meeting. The supporters don't show up, but the opposition does. So I would say that, and as far as making the decision for them, there's some things that I think the school committee has the responsibility to at least lay out to the taxpayers, and that is we serve as a conduit between the educators in our district and the taxpayers. And so, you know, as I look out in the audience and I see Mr. Ducey here from finance, I realize that, you know, we have these squabbles every single year where finance is struggling to keep the tax numbers down. The school district is trying to find ways to save money, and yet, you know, when we come up with a way that would obviously save us money, you know, we say, well, the taxpayers don't want it. So the options are pretty simple, right? You can either let your tax rates skyrocket, and at some point, people will get sick of it, or you can say, you can take a hard line to say, this is the best way to use our resources. So I don't think we're wrong for saying it either way, but I would say that, you know, the fact that I've talked to many parents who are in agreement of it, I would just say that, you know, that needs to be taken into account as well.
Just a point of clarification, the planning committee is not done. It was just a moment of pause. Just we did hear all of this, the people that did show up, and we, you know, we're just taking that information and digesting it, and taking it into consideration and trying to figure out the best way that we can share the benefit and share the information in such a way where it reaches a broader audience, and making sure that they understand the impacts of the decisions that they're making so we can be successful at town meeting. And the point that we were, we don't know whether or not it would have passed at both times. We don't know, but the feeling that when we met at the planning committee and at the school committee was that it may not have been successful, just due to timing. So it's not over, nothing has been decided, but we are looking at other options. We did hear what everybody said, and we just want to make sure that we meet everybody where they are, making sure that they have the information, know where to find the information, and we implore everybody to show up to our meetings, send emails, ask questions, visit the superintendent, so on and so forth. School choice, I would like to recommend that we continue this conversation, but I would like to vote on each one of these choice seats for each grade level and building individually, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay? Is everyone all set with the school choice conversation?
You're gonna make a separate motion for each grade level.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So who would like to make a motion?
All right, make a motion to accept school choice for Green Meadows for 2 for grade 1. Someone second.
Second.
Question to discussion? We will do roll call. Or, we can go all in favor, so. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, so motion carries 4-2.
No.
No, motion fails.
Fails 4-2, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to accept 3 school choice students for 2nd grade at Green Meadows.
Second.
Question to discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Aye. Opposed, nay.
Okay, motion fails 4-2.
I'd like to make a motion to accept 3 school choice students for Green Meadows for grade 4.
Second.
Question to discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion fails 4-0.
I'd like to make a motion to accept 9 school choice students for School Road for grade 4.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails 5-1.
I'd like to make a motion to accept 27 school choice students for Minnetonka Regional High School for grade 9.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 4-2. Okay, thank you. So Aaron, it is still you, discussion of the FY25 budget.
Yeah, let's move on to 25 budget. Give us a moment to pull it up and this up. Aaron has it up. We have our usual presentation for you. An introduction slide. And so as we get into the budget, it's important.
Excuse me, Aaron, one quick question, sorry to interrupt. Is this the same that you're going to give at the 6:30 budget hearing?
Yes, it's 5 minutes of 7. So we're a little late.
So you're gonna give it and then you give it again, is what I'm saying?
No, this is, I mean, we're going right into the hearing.
Okay, that's what I just
That's what
wanted
I
to
presume.
clarify.
I mean,
Yep,
so,
thank you.
okay. So just to get things off, much of our budget, any of the additions that we're talking to our budget are very much based on our district 5-year strategic plan. This was created through a year-long process. We had a large group of constituents from the community. I believe there were 35 members of that committee. There was also a survey done of at least 700 members of the community who took that survey and provided input. So we then used that input to create a framework to schedule various strategic initiatives through the district. So we talk about some of those strategic initiatives in the next slide. This year we are in year 2 of the strategic plan. The 2 items that are going to cost money in this year are some additional math professional development. You can see down below that relates directly to strategic objective 1A. I'll let you read that if you wish. Then we're also proposing the addition of a 9th grade vocational at Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative. We're one of, we're probably the only district I know of statewide. We're definitely the only district I know of statewide. John?
I just wanted to add to that, I received a email from the executive director this afternoon indicating that LVPEC would no longer be accepting students in 10th grade, meaning the only way for students to attend would be to be allowed in 9th grade.
And when did you receive that document?
This afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Very well. So that speaks to strategic objective 1C in our strategic plan. Happy to let you read that. Our strategic plan is available online on our website. So as we move forward, we start looking at what are some of the things that we are accomplishing in fiscal 24. It's important to realize that we've been working this all along, and our first item is completion of multi-tier systems of support. It's actually in version 1.1. I think we're going to be at 2.0 when we hit fiscal 25 next year. So I'm a little ahead of the game on that. We've implemented a new early literacy and math K-8 curriculum. That is some of what the professional development we're proposing will go towards, that math K-12 curriculum. We've also trained teams at each school to implement comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. Again, if you go through our strategic plan, you can find items related to this directly in our strategic plan. So I'm going to turn it over to John for a few slides. He's going to talk a little bit about our accomplishments.
Thank you. This will be familiar to you because these are items that are excerpted from the accountability report that I give in the fall, although I wanted to share them with the community because more people may be watching tonight. And I know that in our Finance and Operations Subcommittee meeting, one of the things that Mr. Ducey has mentioned repeatedly are the need to help the community understand how we measure success, what are our metrics. And so you'll be very familiar with this, but you know that I look at different measures. One is our performance compared to the statewide average, then our performance compared to the LVPEC group average, and then most importantly, our performance as compared to our peer districts. So in all of these, in these next 2 charts, our performance is in green. Our peer group, which is the 10 most similar districts to us, is in orange, and then the LVPEC average is in yellow, and then the statewide average is in blue. And this is a time series of 3 years, so maybe a little bit hard to tell, but that green line edged above all the rest of the lines for the first time in 2023. This is 10th grade English language arts performance, showing that we're above our peer group. We're well above the LVPEC average and even farther above the statewide average. Moving to the next slide, which is mathematics achievement. Again, 10th grade, and the colors represent the same groups of schools. And you can see again in 2023, we moved ahead of our peer group, the LVPEC group, and far above the statewide average. So those are one of the ways we look at our successes. Also, we look at post-secondary success, and we look at it in two ways. This is a very narrow measure of success, so I just want to be clear about that from the beginning. We don't discount students who go directly from high school into the career, into the military or careers as successful outcomes. But one of the things that our community is often asked about is how do we do in terms of success in post-secondary education? Here, looking at statewide average, because we don't have as fine-grained analysis available for each of the districts in those that are included in those previous slides, you can see that our initial enrollment in higher ed is much higher than the statewide average, but what's even more important is our persistence into the second year, because the highest dropout year in post-secondary education is freshman to sophomore year. And you can see that we continue to be above the statewide average of students still enrolled after their second year of college. In fact, we have our rate of students who are still enrolled after the second year of college is even higher than the statewide average of students who enroll at all. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
Fair enough. Okay, some of you may recognize this next slide. It's shown up in the past few years. It really highlights the trends in low-income populations. You can see that across our region, in fact, and the state, low-income numbers have shot upwards over the past 15 years. Just this year, it does seem to be leveling off. Some of that could be due to ARA funding, things like that, post-COVID. And I want to highlight, you may have heard me speak in prior meetings, that an average low-income student costs 35% more to educate than a non-low-income student. That's based on two studies. The first is a 2004 study by Syracuse University Center for Policy Research that shows a 41% differential, and a 2013 study by the California Budget Project that supports a 30%. So when I speak on that, I'm averaging those two scores to get to 35%. So then we get into, this is often a question that comes up when people compare our budgets to, say, municipal school districts like Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, West Springfield, and compare our budget and say, well, your budget's higher. Our district, as a regional district, takes on a number of costs that those districts don't bear. The biggest three are employee health insurance, retiree health insurance, and retirement contributions. We spend somewhere close to $9 million on those three items alone when we look at this list. So the other items down there are sequentially smaller, but they're all significant. Just so that when you're comparing budgets and you look at, say, Longmeadow's or East Longmeadow's budget, Ludlow's budget compared to ours, you really need to be comparing apples to apples. So as we start looking at what are some of the major drivers to the increases you will see in our budget, biggest item is always contractual salaries. You will see in the next couple slides that we mitigate that a little bit. So not the very next slide, but the following slide, you'll see that we mitigate that a little bit this year. Instructional technology, this is an item we were asked to move from the capital budget to the operating budget by the towns last year, and we've done so. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. Utilities have been a bit of a wild card and a challenge, as I've shared this past year. Utilities went up significantly last year. When I planned the budget, I planned for an increase, but I also planned for a decrease based on the fix of the Minnetonka lighting. Some of that was just a best guess. I wanted to try to be fair. I may have guessed a little high as to the impact of the lights. So this year we need to make up a little bit of that and plan accordingly. Some of the other items, I won't read the whole list, out of district programs, retirement costs, strategic plan impacts, things like that, all impact our budget. So when we look at that instructional technology piece, these are the items that we have had put on our capital plan, we're asked to move to the operating budget. The biggest driver of that is Chromebooks for one-to-one programming at the middle and high school level. This assumes for approximately 220 students going into 6th grade and then going into 9th grade. So we would replace those Chromebooks twice through the life of that program. The older Chromebooks that were then pulled out of service for one-to-one would move to carts at the elementary schools. So the total cost of these, at a cost of roughly $350 per unit, would come to $154,000. Classroom projectors, we did do a fairly large overhaul of projectors this year thanks to capital funds from the towns. However, all of our middle school and elementary school projectors need to be replaced, and we need to start developing a cycle for replacing them. A typical projector will last 8 to 10 years, some a little shorter, some a little longer, give or take. Projectors are not based on a year lifespan. Their lifespan is based in hours. So a teacher that uses their projector more will likely burn through that projector faster. So then we get into staff laptops. This is something we frequently in the past had paid for through end-of-year funds. There were some issues with that raised by the towns in past years, so we're also moving that to the operating budget. Finally, for the Chromebooks that we have, if we're going to maintain one-to-one programming, there is software necessary to secure and control them, particularly when students bring those Chromebooks home. We also have to have scanning and firewall services when that happens.
Can I ask you a question before you change the slide? That $154,000 for Chromebooks, for the 440 Chromebooks.
Yep.
Didn't you used to give that to the town as a kind of a, yeah.
Didn't we what? Used to be on the capital. Yes, it used to be on our capital plan, yes.
Right, so so we took that $154,000 and we put that into our budget, which would increase our budget, correct?
Yes.
So that $154,000 in the past has been a capital expenditure and it hasn't appeared on the budget of the school committee. Is that correct?
Yes. So in the past, when I got here, everyone was in one-to-one in COVID. There had also been a commitment to have one-to-one programming separate from COVID at the middle and high school levels. So in order to maintain that, we've used ESSER funds for the past few years, but without an operational source of funding for that, so that we could identify it, I put it on the capital plan. We didn't know where the money was coming from, right? We knew if we were going to maintain this program, we needed the money. So I wanted to earmark that and keep it in sort of the forum, right? So I kept it on the capital plan.
Right.
Last year it was determined in multiple meetings with towns that they felt it was best for this money to be part of our operating budget. So I've included it in the operating budget this year.
So COVID basically changed education as we know it, right? It made computers critical to a child's education in our district, pretty much every grade, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And the town asked us to take that $154,000 out of capital and to put it into our budget, correct?
All of these instructional technology items, all of these items were on the capital plan. We were asked to
These
approve.
items, huh? So that's $254,000 that normally would have been paid for by the town under capital expenditures has now been put into our budget.
Well, that we would have requested from the town, so
Right.
capital.
Okay.
I think the one that I didn't recognize was the laptops
Yeah.
for staff.
Yeah.
That was usually, like I said, that was end of year.
Yeah, that's something that previously has been, again, in ESSER, we had some money, we did replace some laptops for staff along the way. However, that was, my understanding is that's one of those items that we kind of, when we had money available at the end of the year, we would replace some laptops with it. It predated me, but that's my understanding. We do need to have a source of funding to replace staff laptops.
So I think it's,
So
and I think
that's
it's,
what this is.
Yeah.
We were told they didn't want us using end of year funds, right? So we have to have it somewhere.
so from a budgetary perspective, from Hamden's perspective, this is wonderful, right? Because the way Hamden works their town meeting is they have one school budget, one vote. So when we started separating out different capital expenses, it would, you know, it would basically muck them up a little bit. Whereas in Wilbraham, we, you know, going after capital expenses and putting them as separate articles on the warrant, you know, it worked. The interesting thing is, and what Sean is getting to, is the fact that there's, you know, let's say $300,000 that is now added to our budget, which wasn't there previously. Now, on a $50,000 budget, you're looking at, you know, what, a 2.6% increase on the budget, not very much. But if that $300,000 for this was pulled out of that budget, 254, right, so that 250,000, so that 250,000 that would go back into that if we took that stuff, put it out of the budget, put it back in capital, then your budget wouldn't necessarily be increased by that 250,000. So when we go and we have a, you know, budget request in the two towns, looking at the budget increase, there is 0.6% of that budget increase is stuff that we ordinarily would not have asked for in the general fund. It would have been handled as separate capital expenses. So when we look at this year's budget request, I guess one of the things that we need to appreciate is that, you know, whatever increase we see, some of that increase is explained right here.
Correct. And I think it's important to note that state statute, as well as the regional agreement, presumes for a single line item, right? Capital and operating. But, you know, again, I think we've accommodated the splitting out of things in the past. It's not a big deal. But, you know, again, we were asked to move these. These were seen as operating items. And there are other items that will stay split out as capital items, things that are more one-off that we won't ask for every year.
Yeah.
Right? A boiler, right? Things like that.
And just going back, because we had talked at the top of the presentation, you were talking about the, when we look at the major drivers for the budget, and one of them was the addition of ninth grade vocational education. So a little birdie told me that there was quite a discussion at the finance committee level in the town of Wilbraham regarding this expense. I think that the number one thing that I would remind the finance committee of is that when we did the strategic plan, access to vocational training was without a doubt the number one concern of everybody that had attended that strategic plan. I mean, it was by far, like when you went up to the board and you put your little stickers down, I mean, it was 3/4 of the people had put stickers down for vocational training. And now, in light of the fact that you just said that there will be no acceptance for 10th graders into vocational training programs, this has foresight, because we already saw it coming. And so this program, if we don't get these kids into the 9th grade, they're not getting into vocational training. And already our vocational training opportunities are limited anyways, as we've talked about before. Auto repair, I think the nearest is, the only one is Pathfinder. And then if you want to do agriculture, basically you're going to Smith.
Bill, you were on the strategic planning committee, and you did say it was really important to have increased vocational for the students in high school, bringing it down to 9th grade. Was there any talk about how to fund this or anything like that, or how important it was, what they would be willing to give up in order to get that?
No, the strategic planning level, the idea is, you know, it's basically a 35,000 foot exercise, and you know, you're bringing in people from all different, you know, all different spheres of life in the two towns. You have retirees, you have people with no children, you have people with children in the district, and, you know, so you know, these are sort of aspirational discussions that you have at the strategic planning level. It's not, you're not getting into the nitty-gritties to decide, what you're gonna cut in order to bring vocational training in. But I think it's very important that everybody in this room and everybody in our two communities, and certainly the people that did take the time to participate in the strategic plan, understand that, like, we need to take that seriously. I mean, that was a very well-attended strategic plan. There was a lot of people there. A lot of people put in a lot of time and effort into it. And at the end of the day, that was by far the #1 driver of that.
So the number one thing that planning committee wanted to recommend to us was to increase the vocational offerings at the high school. Would that be correct?
Yeah. I feel like I'm being interviewed. But
No.
yeah, it's like,
Thank you very much.
because I just want to make sure. No, because I actually told John,
Like I'm watching an episode of like,
yeah, no, it's like, yeah.
get.
So I meet the press. But I say that because, John, like, back when we first passed that strategic plan, and you came out with what sort of the rollout of that strategic plan, you and I had a discussion, that was a year and a half ago. And that discussion was basically, you need to understand that vocational training was by far the #1 concern of our strategic planning committee.
I remember it clearly. I was sitting about here, you were sitting right about there. And I had created this timeline for implementation, and I had initially put the expansion of vocational education farther down the line. And you said, the only thing I don't like about your timeline is that vocational education doesn't happen early enough, so please accelerate that, which we did. And I think to the benefit of our students, who would have been locked out from vocational opportunities if we hadn't done that.
Well, if you talk to people in the vocations right now, you talk to your tin knockers, you talk to your plumbers, you talk to your electricians, your carpenters, they all say the same thing. They're starving for kids coming out of school that have experience doing this stuff and an interest in it.
If I can clarify John's statement, those students would not be locked out. They would be attending Pathfinder, they would be attending Smith Voc. So we would be paying for all of those students to attend Pathfinder and Smith Vocational, possibly Westfield, and we would be paying for the transportation for all of those students.
And hold on, I have a question, Aaron.
It's not a lockout, they have a right.
If the VOTEC kids don't go to Pioneer Valley and they go to those other out-of-district schools, is the tuition we pay per student higher?
Yes.
By how much? Like a couple bucks
So
higher?
11,000 for Lower Pioneer Valley, 21,000 for Smith Vocational and Pathfinder. Additionally, Lower Pioneer Valley takes all of our students to LP-VET on one bus. We would have a series of vans to take them to Smith Vocational, Pathfinder, possibly Westfield. The cost of that can be extraordinary.
What would be your estimate for transportation costs? Just spitballing. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
2 per day.
You'd be looking at a single van is for a student is about $200 a day. When you double up, so that can be 180 days. That can be $36,000. Now we could double, triple up kids in some vans, but it still wouldn't come to the money on that would become extraordinary. Even if we had one van to each location, 36, 72, whatever, 108,000. And that's even if we only had one van to each of those locations. We might have to have 2 vans to some of those.
So would it be out of turn to say that the potential, just notwithstanding the increases in the tuition costs, the transportation costs alone would reach $59,000 a year?
Oh, easily.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think we're on major budget savings. So as I alluded to when we talked about the major budget increases, we have some staffing decreases based on some moves that have been made through sort of the collapse of the middle school at Green Meadows School, as well as some planned moves of students out of TWB into Minichog. So we have staff reductions at Green Meadows totaling $313,000. That comes right out of the 450-some thousand in contractual increases. We also had a very reasonable increase to our retiree health insurance costs, and actually that resulted in a decrease to our estimated total retiree health insurance costs. There may be a couple factors to that, including some retirees moving on to Medicare plans that are lower cost and save us money. We had some retirements during the budget process. We also reduced some staffing and student services. None of these at the moment result in any employee losses of positions. We're fairly sure that we will retain all of the employees who have jobs. This is mostly vacant positions. Another thing to keep in mind is that while it doesn't show up as a budget savings per se, we kept our health insurance increase to 0% this year. We worked with the other member districts of, other members of Scantic Valley Regional Trust, which includes the town of Wilbraham, East Longmeadow, Longmeadow, Lord Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative is a member, and we held them to a 0% increase this year for employee health insurance. That resulted in saving us $130,000 against what I would have budgeted for an increase. So then we get into some of the unfortunate things we've had happen this year is we've had some revenue challenges. So we've lost our ESSER grant. Everyone's ESSER grant ended. You will see a lot of people talking about the fiscal cliff in fiscal 25. This is part of it. And we have some of the mitigated savings that's helping offset that this year, which is pretty significant. We also spent through a lot of excess and deficiency funds in the past 2 years to maintain our budget, sort of in a post-COVID world, and keep assessments to the levels the towns could deal with. So this year we don't have as much money to put towards our E&D. Athletics, as you'll recall, ran a deficit last year. We've used some money in the past to offset the, or we've used some money from athletics revolving to offset some salaries. I'm really just pulling that out for the time being. If we start seeing the athletics revolving account move into the black, we can start, moving towards some offsets again. That's probably a couple years out, but we're seeing increased support from the boosters. I believe Steve Regret is trying to make some changes around transportation, consolidating some things to save some money. The biggest driver to that also was the change in the MIAA playoffs format. I won't dwell on that, but it moved from a regional model to a statewide model that added a lot of cost to the systems. So a couple other items. We have a pretty big significant increase in our circuit breaker funding, which is a plus. That does relate directly to some of the increases we've had in the past few years to our special education costs. We're hopeful that by fiscal 26, we might be able to drive down some of those costs. And then we had a few minor increases in grants and interest. So overall, the amelioration of some of things like circuit breaker, transportation reimbursement, our revenue changes are mitigated, so we're really only losing about $139,822. So as we talked about some of the staffing reductions on the other page, these are sort of the specific positions that we will be reducing, that we reduced last year and we will be reducing this year. Some of these are positions that were ESSER funded, separate from the $350,000 that supported the budget. These are some mental health positions that we used in many cases to help us through COVID that we will no longer have. Moving to the next, this is just a reminder that last year, the Massachusetts Operational Services Division allowed for a 14% increase to private out-of-district placements. This put a huge strain on budgets last year. We estimate this added over $300,000 in costs to us. Other districts were hit in various levels, but every single district across the state that had any student in a private out-of-district placement was impacted by this 14% increase. So in response, the legislature put forth a reserve relief. So it was an allotment of funding that was designed to provide relief against this 14% increase. However, they created a formula, a relatively complicated formula to determine whether you determined. The first piece was an increase in the cost of 7.55%. I have no idea why 7.55%, but that's what they chose. Our percent increase, as you could see, was 13.5%. So we met that delineator. And this is comparing year on year, so we had a little bit of a reduction as well that helped ameliorate some of that total increase. The next piece, though, of that is that your increase had to be more than 1/2 of 1% of your fiscal 23 net school spending. When I calculate 1/2 of 1% of our fiscal 2023 net school spending, I come up with $226,211, which means that our increase of $185,000 does not result in any relief, so we do not qualify. I know it's complicated, I know it seems weird, but regardless of whether you had an overall increase or decrease in your total costs, you were subject to that 14% increase from OSD. In our mind, everyone who was impacted with that, regardless, should get back 14% of that, but that's not what the state decided to do.
Are you aware of any districts in the western part of the state that did qualify for that?
I'm not. I could reach out. I was
I'd be
honestly
interested
just
to see
frustrated at the process and didn't think to reach out to anyone and ask.
So I'm pretty sure the state had probably some of the best actuarial consultants on this, making sure that whatever number they hit, that's why they go with 7.55% and 0.5% of the net school spending, so that, a fraction of a percent of the school districts in the state would actually qualify for reimbursement, but it would look like they were doing something.
Right. So adding a little insult to injury, this is the second iteration. This year is the second iteration of the Student Opportunity Act plan. So the Student Opportunity Act was enacted in fiscal 21. The district put out its first Student Opportunity Act plan in fiscal 22. And for that, we received $0 in additional funding. There are 318 districts in the state. We are one of 211 districts that receives no additional funding under the Student Opportunity Act, yet every district has to provide a Student Opportunity Act plan. So this year, we have to submit a new 3-year plan. We brought that to school committee earlier tonight. They've approved it. We will send that off to the state. This is an unfunded mandate, effectively, for the vast majority of school districts statewide. So, finally we get to sort of the bottom line. What's our budget, right? So our proposed fiscal 25 budget is $54,239,159 for a total increase of $1,299,219, getting ahead of myself, for a percent increase of 2.45%. So the next page, before we get into assessments, these are assessment increases of other regional districts across the state. We surveyed these in February. I've done some follow-up to that. I didn't add it to the slide. So our total budget increase is 2.45%. Our net increase to assessments is 3.62%. In addition to what's on here, East Hampton is looking at a budget increase of almost 10%. Northampton is looking at a budget increase of 8%. Amherst Public Schools is looking at a $1.7 million shortfall just in their 7 to 12 programming where they're regionalized. Mahar is looking at a 5% increase to its budget. So that's in Western Mass. Going further, Brookline is facing $2.5 million in cuts. Pittsfield is looking at a $3.6 million shortfall. Marblehead, $2.3 million in cuts. Braintree, $8 million in cuts. Danvers is looking at a 6.41% budget increase, and Andover is looking at $2.7 million in budget cuts. So, you know, when we talk about budget challenges and the fiscal cliff, this is going to be a challenging year for districts across the state. We're very lucky in some of the savings we've had. We're very lucky in holding health insurance to 0%, that our regional trust had money in the bank to be able to do that for us. So when we then look at assessments, both towns have what's called a minimum contribution. Then we add in their share of transportation. Then we look at what's called discretionary. That's when we take the total budget together, what's left over, and that's split between the towns in accordance with their student counts. That gets to a total operating assessment. Then we have a debt assessment for Minneshaw, which then gets us into a total assessment. Total combined assessment for two towns, $39,050,715. I'll break each town out individually next. For Hamden, their total primary assessment would be $8,813,481, made up of a $158,000 increase to their minimum contribution, an increase of $2,278 to their transportation assessment, their above minimum, that discretionary amount of $86,301, and then the regional debt assessment actually goes down a little bit this year. We had a small carryover from a refinance that came about last year, and that was $6,600. So that comes out of it for this year. So a very small decrease, but it's something, right? Total change in assessment of $245,288, or 2.56%. We get to Wilbraham, total primary assessment of $30,237,234, minimum contribution increase of $661,804, transportation at $27,621, that discretionary above minimum contribution $433,535, and then when we factor in the savings on the debt assessment, we get to a total change of $1,118,010, or 3.84%. So as we talk about this, I won't dwell too much on this. These are our primary funding sources. You can see most of our funding comes from the Wilbraham assessment, our Chapter 70 state aid, Hamden assessment, a little bit from excess and deficiency, Medicare reimbursement, and interest income. And that comes to our total budget. Then how do we intend on spending the money? The vast majority of our funding goes to students. When you look at instructional services, other school services, and out of district, those are all direct student services. Fixed costs includes health insurance, retirement for our employees, retiree health insurance. That's that almost $9 million that I talked about. There's a few other things like insurance, liability insurance that rolls into that. Debt service, and then operations and maintenance, keeping the buildings clean, keeping them maintained. Finally, we look at leadership and administration. I believe that comes to about 2.3% of the total, $1.3 million. We come to a total budget that matches our revenues of $54,239,159. So finally, we have some capital needs at Minnechaug that we are proposing. We have a need to update the wireless access point system in the building. This building is now 12 years old or more. The wireless access system is original to the building. So while we've occasionally replaced some individual wireless access points, the technology as a whole is 12 years old right now. In general, you would replace these sorts of systems every 8 years or so. 12 years is getting pretty long. especially with a one-to-one program at this school. It gets increasingly challenging. The demands, even if Chromebooks get high over the years, every year the demand gets higher. So we're asking for $225,000 to replace the wireless controller as well as all of the wireless access points to update them to current technology. You can see the splits there. So finally, you know, we get into, I share a couple of videos. I shared them last year. I think they're pretty meaningful videos. And if Aaron could bring them up. These were two of Zillow's very first ads. Zillow spends very... Oops, can you get up on the screen? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, why is it not?
It's not coming up on the screen? I think you need to close the presentation quickly.
Oh, okay.
Maybe? So I'll describe it quickly. Or we can stop. So,
Not just looking for a house.
oh, there we go. Could you restart that one there?
Not just looking for a house. You're looking for a place where you want to have. You're not just looking for a house. You're looking for a place where you want to have. Zillow.
So they're two short commercials. I'm sorry if they didn't come across well. Don't worry about it. The first is actually called Returning Soldier. It's a husband and wife. The husband is stationed overseas. He's a soldier. They are looking at homes together online. The wife has found a beautiful home near parks, great streets, everything you could ask for. And the husband says, yeah, but look at the schools. And immediately that house is off the table. That's a non-starter for them. They're not looking at it anymore. The other one actually highlights the fact that schools is a very important aspect of the Zillow system. If you go to Zillow, you will see a link to great schools. It will highlight exactly where your school stands in the continuum. There's no app within the Zillow system that shows you potholes or police and fire response times, right? These are the things people might complain about, but when they're actively buying a home, the thing they're looking at is the schools. So this is the one that highlights the schools.
The rain, so everything changed last spring. Blankets on me.
You're not just looking for a house. You're looking for a place where you want to have. Zillow.
So that one highlighted, that was the one that highlights the very first thing it focused on was, you know, this is where our kids are going to go to school, right? And again, it has the link to great schools. So, you know, if you think about the things that as a community you can control, you can't control whether your town is on Martha's Vineyard, right? Most expensive property in the country is now in Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts, which is on Martha's Vineyard. But what you can control is the quality of your schools, and that's funding your schools. So finally, Aaron's going to get us to sort of the last slide, which leads from the last one. This is the great schools map of where we are and where we stand, right? And I think the question is, you know, where do we envision ourselves on this map? What's our long-range plan? What is our strategic plan telling us about where we could be? And I believe that is it. Oh, nope. One more is a quote, and this is a quote that's been around since, as far as I can remember. Different people have said it at different times. But this iteration is, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value, right? So the things we value are in that strategic plan, right? And they're embedded in our budget. And that's what we're carrying forward to the school committee and eventually the towns to consider.
So thank you for that, Aaron. I got a quick point to make. I believe that the Wilbraham Finance tonight voted to fund the full budget, but they excluding $81,203 that they said because of the VOTEC programs that were increasing in the 9th grade. I'm not sure where that 81,203 comes from, if that makes sense to you. But the reason why is because that we didn't have consideration of funding when we put that on the budget. With all the cuts and stuff that we have done to make room for things like that, and then taking on that extra, Wilbraham's piece would be $200,000 that normally would go to capital, but instead we're on our budget. And it just has me asking this question. So since when does Wilbraham Finance, when does that committee have the power to line item veto things from our budget? It seems like if they don't like an item, it wasn't last year, it was something about TWB for a while, and then we met together and we talked about it. So, I mean, and also, if we're thinking about this, why aren't they elected officials? I mean, we elect people to school committee, library, water, the town auditors, even the cemetery. And I'm not saying cemetery's not important, it is important. But if I would rather have someone that was appointed, I would say appoint them for cemetery and elect them for Wilbraham Finance. Because when you're on that finance committee and you're not elected by anyone, you're appointed, you have that distance, you know, from the public. You're not held accountable for these line item vetoes, which frankly I just think is reckless. I don't think any of them were qualified to say if that should be vetoed, you know, or not. I don't know how many of them really understand all the implications. So that's unfortunate. The good thing is that the $181,720.74 for the switches was approved, but for some reason the fire alarms for the schools were not approved. Yes?
If I may, I don't want to respond to most of that, but I will respond to the idea of a line item veto. Vocational education is an entitlement in the state of Massachusetts. It can't be vetoed. There's no body, including the school committee, that can veto vocational education. I just wanted to say that.
I would hope, thanks Sean for that. I would hope there might be some reconsideration on that, especially in light of what we had just talked about tonight with the limitations on students being able to enroll in the LPVEC programs and the potential for relatively catastrophic financial implications for the district. Not even in regards just to tuition increases, but also transportation. It seems to make sense to me. And again, you know, if we want to ever have another strategic plan in our towns again, I think it would behoove us to pay attention to what the people talked about at the first strategic plan and you know, take them seriously and you know, and work on what it is. Again, it is a big piece of education not even in our state, but around the country that's missing. Vocations are screaming for people.
And I also want to make it clear that the people on Wilbraham Finance, all the elected officials in this town are basically volunteering their time, and they're working really hard to come up with the best solutions as possible. I would have rather have gotten a message, received a message from finance that said, we just don't have enough money to give you, we can give you this, but we can't give you $84,000. We just can't afford it. You know, that I understand, but for them to say, well, we don't like how you did this on this, so we're going to deny you that money. This is the second year in a row that they've done something like this, and I think it's a very dangerous precedent.
Hey, Aaron, did you spend all of E&D?
Yes.
So
E&D spends every dime.
So E&D's going down to the bottom of the tank. Okay.
So I guess I'm going to make just one comment on this because we've heard already a lot. I understand the members of Wilbraham FinCom have their opinion and their perspective. And I also, like you said, Sean, if they said we just need the budget to be $80,000 less, that's one thing. But, you know, the number one thing I've heard has been, we need more support for VOTEC, we need better VOTEC, we need more VOTEC. We need to do, but in the interest of being financially responsible to the taxpayers in our towns, we also need to make sure that we're doing well with the VOTEC in our district, because the costs are nearly double every time a student steps out of the district. And so the consequences could be for skyrocketing tuition expenses, not to mention the transportation, which is so expensive it's hard to calculate even on the fly. You know, we've already voted and approved our new plan for the Student Opportunity Act, which includes the addition of VOTEC at the 9th grade. So we'd have to go, if we don't vote for the budget as proposed and we're going to cut the 9th grade VOTEC, number one, we'd be locking all of the VOTEC students out of attending in-district VOTEC. They'd have to all go out of district. And I don't know how many students that is, but like $21,000 each, that's going to add up really quick. And then we'd have to rewrite, Aaron would have to rewrite this plan, and then we'd have to re-vote on that Student Opportunity Act plan, which I understand is just paperwork, because they don't actually give us more money, but is part of our legal requirements to do. And it, you know, and personally, you know, I've made promises to so many people in our towns about fighting for VOTEC opportunity. I think people think that maybe I won't advocate for it or push for it because I'm a doctor and it's not that I don't advocate college and higher education and staying in school and studying really hard, but you can't ignore the huge deficit in vocational workers that we have, particularly in our region. I mean, I still remember seeing less than a year ago the ad on Facebook where one of the local electrical companies was actually offering a reward for anyone that was referred to them that actually took a job to work for them. They were offering a reward for someone just referring someone to work with them. That's how desperate they were. We can't ignore the voice of the community through the strategic plan, the voice of the community through Facebook and outreach, and when we talk to them. And so anyway, that's my comment. Obviously, my perspective is to support the budget as proposed with already all the cuts that were made ahead of time, but not to cut it.
Yeah, I would offer that, and hearing what Sean had said, I don't think the finance committee not being privy to the information that you were given this afternoon from Lower Pioneer Valley, I think that may have definitely been an influential piece of information for them. And so, I would say that I support the budget as it's written, and I think those dollars are very well spent for our district. So I make a motion that we approve.
We can do the hearing first.
What's that?
Public comment.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, let's make public comment.
Do we have anyone online that wants to make public comment?
Anyone at all?
It's on the loan FinCom.
Hit the button, hit the button.
Good evening, so I guess I'm the lone FinCom rep here. I'll just address it, there was no line item veto. It was simply a justification. We don't have to offer that, but we thought we would, so that was the justification behind it. It was specifically about that area.
Hang on, I lost the page.
I have it in front of me. I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget as proposed.
The FY25 budget.
FY25 budget, $54,239,159.
Second.
Third?
Any additional questions or discussion?
Yeah, what are the steps that we would need to go if we can't reach an agreement with the FinCom? What would we need to do in order to get this budget passed?
So
So my understanding is that the budget voted by the school committee is the budget that would go to town meeting. The FinCom or the select boards or whoever could offer, could vote, could state that they are against it, they oppose it, but eventually, effectively, it would go to the town to vote, the town itself.
Can we look into that? Because for some reason, I thought that what went on the docket was what finance proposes.
No, what goes on the docket statute says that.
Yeah, what goes on the warrant, what goes on the article for the warrant is what the school committee proposes. The finance committee will be at the town meeting, and there will be a comment, the finance committee recommends. If the finance committee does not recommend it and the towns vote down the budget, then it begins this whole god-awful process that involves, basically coming up with an interim budget. The state takes over. You got to do a 1/12 budget. It's a nasty little ordeal. I mean, 80,000 isn't a huge sum of money, but again, looking at the conversation that we've had around vocational training tonight, and understanding that that is it's a key piece, and a very it shows a lot of foresight within the district, because we were actually advocating for those kids to get into vocational training in 9th grade.
Public comments.
I did just say that. Yes, you were. Just in the effort that it's one person, I'm happy to apply.
If I may. So the process is this: it goes to town meeting with the budget proposed by the school committee. If FinCom will make a recommendation based on that, the town will vote on it. If either town votes it down, it comes back to you for reconsideration, and then you bring it back. We vote on it again. If it gets turned down again, it goes back for reconsideration. It then goes to a joint town meeting between the two towns, and we would vote on it as two-town community. And then beyond that, I don't know what happens.
That's when the state steps in.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments before we take the vote? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. Thank you, everybody.
Aaron, John, thank you for all your hard work. It's very much appreciated. And everyone who was on the Finance and Operations Subcommittee of the HWRSD. A lot of hard work, a lot of meetings, a lot of times away from our families, and the people who were representatives from finance and from advisory from Hampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Academy, my mother.
We are going to loop back and go back to number 6 to our consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0.
Did the warrant stall out somewhere?
We did. Okay, so our next meeting is Monday, the 25th, at 5 o'clock here in the IRC, the budget roundtable. And then, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we'll do roll call. Vote. Bill?
Yep.
Cheryl? Yes. Sean?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Mike?
Yeah.
And myself, aye, we are adjourned.